Welcome to Ask Ms. ERP. The topic of this video is what is special about ERP licensing? Hello everyone, Ms. ERP here. In the previous video, I talked about ERP security. Closely tied to this is ERP licensing. The key message that I would like to convey to you in this video is that you need to understand how your ERP is licensed and then how the usage of those licenses is measured. Licensing is generally controlled with your ERP security, and how the two work together is not always clear.
Abracadabra.
There are many different ways that ERP product vendors license their products. It could be by company revenue, by number of users, or by services, just as examples. In on-premise systems, it is becoming rare that an application vendor will ask for an audit. So for the most part, licensing is just a guideline. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't avoid being compliant, it just means that the vendor is less likely to check up on you. And even if they do, they are likely to be willing to work with you to sort out any anomalies.
We will work together. Yes, we will work together.
Licensing by company revenue or some other company-based financial metric is likely the easiest to handle, but it could also be expensive. You would need to understand the implications of this carefully, and also to really know where your company is going in the future if this licensing metric is to make sense for you. You could also be licensed by data size, or the number of specific records or transactions. This licensing metric might make sense for something like expense reports, but again, you need to understand what it means for you and your company, particularly if you are a growing company. More common is to license by users. Some ERPs have an internal throttle, so you would not be able to add any more user IDs until you purchase more licenses. This is also pretty easy to manage, as you usually don't have to worry about exactly what the users need access to within the ERP, at least from a licensing perspective. It also prompts good user hygiene, as you will be incented to remove users once they no longer need access. A note on this type of licensing is that it is usually more difficult to downsize the number of licenses that you have. So don't go bonkers on purchasing a bunch of licenses until you actually need them. Another way of licensing is by services. These services are then typically granted to users with roles, which is where security becomes important. In my experience, your license usage will be counted by those users that have had the access granted to them, regardless of whether they are using that service or not. Sometimes it is difficult to map which security access maps to which licensed service, and then things become very tricky to manage. For example, financials and supply chain might be two high-level ERP services that you have purchased. But in reality, both of these are broken into hundreds of detailed security access possibilities. Just granting access to one of these detailed programs or forms may trigger a license use of a higher level service. Read-only roles may or may not trigger a license use, depending on your product. Your ERP may provide predefined roles for you to use. Be careful with these roles, as they might grant access to something that you are not licensed for, or they might introduce a segregation of duties issues. You may have to copy these predefined roles to your own custom roles and modify them to remove the access that you don't need or want. Needless to say, with thousands of specific programs and possibly thousands of users, you can see how this might get complicated. Depending on what tools your ERP provides, you may or may not be able to determine what specific programs or functions your end users are actually accessing to do their jobs. If you can, great. That will help immensely in defining security roles with the least privilege to only services that you are licensed for. If not, the only way to figure out the correct model is with a lot of testing and trial and error. Sometimes the only way to get license usage under control is to remove all access to the offending service from everyone and wait to see who screams. Then you know who really needs that access. A common issue that I have seen that can impact your license usage is to not remove users as they leave the company or move to a different role. Another tip is to minimize the number of people that have super user or admin type roles, as these roles typically use a lot of licenses. In the previous video, I recommended that you have someone internally who really understands your ERP security model, and that person would also be a good candidate to be responsible for monitoring your license usage, as they would be in the best position to know how to resolve any issues. Much better if you can keep on top of this yourself, rather than finding out by your ERP product vendor showing up with a big bill for you. If you are in the cloud, it is easy for them to see what your license usage is. In summary, you really do need to know what you are licensed for in your ERP, what's included and what is not, how the usage is measured, and what resources are available to you to understand, monitor, and manage your own license usage. This concludes the What is Special About ERP Licensing topic. There is a link on askmizerp.com to email me to ask questions or suggest topics for future videos. Or you can just add comments on any YouTube video. Please subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and see you on the next video.